Some of the attacks were, and especially in Mistrata, were so indiscriminate that there was actually very little that one could do to guarantee safety. Obviously there were some areas which, there was a lot more rockets falling, so I was trying to keep away from those areas to some extent, but at the same time I also had to go to those areas to investigate, because that is where a lot of civilians were being killed. This is a photo I took in one of the hospitals. That was the first patient I saw in Mistrata when I first arrived. She was in her home, and she and her several members of her families were injured. She then pulled through, but basically it's a case, unfortunately, like so many others that I saw in Mistrata, of children and adults alike who were in their home and who were killed or injured.
You could see the destruction. There hasn't been one single building that was unaffected. And this particular building, on top of it, there were snipers by pro-Gaddafi forces who were shooting basically at anything that moved. We would go investigate a case of a killing of a civilian, and inside the family home we find other individuals who've suffered other violations, such as enforced disappearances. I mean, in Mistrata we've noticed this pattern of people being taken from their homes, of people being taken from the street, of people being taken from the mosques by pro-Gaddafi forces and just disappearing.
In many families, it was really all the men of the family, 5 sons and their fathers, 6 sons, cousins. In some families, it was 10, 12 people who were taken from their homes, not at the front. They were not fighting, they were not bearing arms.
I can tell you that in one neighborhood in Mistrata, local organizations have compiled 90 names, and that's one neighborhood in one city, so you can only imagine the extent of the problem across the country.
Certainly there is evidence that war crimes and crimes against humanity were committed, because, I mean, chiefly it was the firing of indiscriminate rockets into residential areas, the cluster bombs, and later the anti-personnel mines, and civilians were shot in their homes or just as they were going about their daily chores.
Well, the crimes committed by the pro-Gaddafi forces are well documented and well reported by Amnesty International, among others. Abuses by opposition forces have been underreported.
Both migrant workers who were accused of being mercenaries, as well as soldiers who are still detained now, quite a lot of them were ill-treated and even tortured upon capture.
And they have been subjected to lynchings in some cases by angry mobs who don't bother to handing them into appropriate authorities or to investigating allegations that they might have been part of violations, but they merely take the law into their own hands with the very dire consequences.
It is very important that the abuses that are committed by opposition forces be addressed, and that the international community also impresses it upon the National Transitional Council that those practices are not acceptable, that those practices must cease, and that those responsible must be brought to justice.